The opinions and statements made on the Josh Bernstein Show are solely those of the host and do not reflect those of any of the show's advertisers or sponsors.
President Trump could cure cancer tomorrow and rescue kittens from a burning building, and they'd still call him a piece of I don't want to drain the swamp. What I want to do is I want to drown these swamp monsters in their own swamp water.
And now, America's favorite bald badass, Josh Bernstein.
Welcome back to the program. So the first thing that I want to say is this. There are literally more people outside of the DNC convention than there are inside, watching it and listening to these idiots spew their hatred for the United States of America. There's about 100,000 people. Now, from what I'm hearing, there's supposed to be a big-time Antifa attack. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but there has been some warnings on social media that something might happen later tonight or tomorrow morning. So we'll have to stay tuned for that. But, you know, all these people that are making these speeches, nobody is listening. Nobody is watching. I can assure you that when the numbers come out, you're going to see that the RNC was higher. The RNC was packed. It was practically standing room only, folks. Okay? This thing is just vast, empty chairs in the top row, all around. It's the same thing as her campaign. Empty promises, nobody showing up to see them, right? Huddled into the corner of a gym somewhere at a high school or a college. It's pathetic. President Trump is winning and winning soundly. You're not going to hear that, though, pretty much anywhere else. And it doesn't mean that we have to let our guard down. It doesn't mean that we have to sit back and, kick back and say we've got this, because we don't. These people are going to try to cheat. Now, there's been some very good news, especially out of Pennsylvania. A judge came down today and said, no more naked ballots. No more naked ballots. Naked ballots are what really stole the race in Pennsylvania in 2020. What is a naked ballot? A naked ballot is a ballot that doesn't have any clothes on it, meaning that it's not secured in the secured envelope. So you can't just hand in a ballot now without the envelope. The judge just ruled that. So that's going to cut down on quite a bit. As I've already said before, we've got a lot of people on the ground in Pennsylvania working their tail off, registering voters. Right now we're 4 times the Democrats in new registered voters. So a number of different combinations could help us. There's 800,000 veterans in Pennsylvania alone, and 30% of them never vote. That's what, 300,000 or so, give or take? Imagine getting those 300,000 low propensity voters to go out to the polls and vote. We can win and we should win, but we have to make sure that we are watching everything and never letting our guard down, okay? So, wanted to kind of point that out first and foremost. Now, what I want to do tonight is going to be a little bit different. It's going to all be about education. And it's not all going to be from my mouth either. It's going to be from someone else who is also very well respected, is an intellect, and is someone that you can definitely say is very, very intelligent, knows the Constitution, knows supply side economics, supply and demand. He knows capitalism as better than just about anybody, and that is the Great Marc Levin. Marc Levin has come out today with a extremely exceptional video. What he does is he breaks down for Kamala, the illiterate mathematician, and he explains to her with using a 6th grade economics test, okay? A 6th grade economics test, exactly how off and wrong she is on everything. And then he follows that with a very interesting video, a cartoon, if you will, that I think is pretty interesting. So, first and foremost, let's do clip number 1. Go and roll this clip.
This show is a public service. It's a public service to educate somebody who is utterly illiterate when it comes to economics. And that would be Vice President Kamala Harris, who seeks to be President of the United States. Now, we know she's utterly illiterate when it comes to economics because we've heard what she's said and we've seen what she's done. So I've taken the liberty of pulling a 6th grade economics test off of the internet. We don't have time to do it the entire show, but just for a few minutes, I want to provide our Vice President, who seeks to be President, who wants to run the economy with her industrial policy ideas, to educate her, because clearly she didn't get a course in basic economics and hasn't read a book on it lately either. And so let's ask her some questions before we go on. For instance, the laws of supply and demand play important roles in this type of economy. A, traditional, B, command, C, market, D, planned. Kamala? No, not traditional. It's called a market economy. We might refer to that as capitalism, you know, the economic system you benefit from but hate. Jada is always at the mall shopping. She is a product exporter, importer, consumer, or overhead. Kamala? No, she's not overhead. C, she's a consumer. Let's try a few more. So far, you flunk. Entrepreneurs are motivated mainly by A, a need to be in charge. Now, that's politicians. B, the desire for risk. C, the hope of making a profit. D, the need to repay their loans. That would be C, the hope of making a profit. And no, Kamala, that doesn't make somebody a profiteer or monopolist. Let's try this one. Making something into a finished product using raw materials is called A, economy, B, manufacturing, C, factors of production, D, interdependence. Well, Kamala, if you said B, manufacturing, you got one right. Let's try this one. Stock market crashes have relatively little effect on the overall economy. A, true, B, false. That would be B, false. What determines the prices of goods in a market economy? Now, this is a tough one, Kamala. It's a very tough one. You've been getting this wrong at least for 20 years. A, customs and traditions. B, government agencies. C, supply and demand. D, customers. Supply and demand. Supply and demand, Kamala. Do you know what supply and demand means? You know what a supply chain is? Do you know why prices go up and prices go down, wages go up and wages go down? I don't think you do. Well, I want to do something very special, which is really never done on cable. I want you to watch a short video. It was put together years ago by the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and it was written by Leonard E. Reed, a brilliant economist in the past. I want you to watch this, all of America, but especially Kamala. Kamala, I kept it nice and tight. It's got graphics. You don't even have to read. Just sit still and watch. You too, America. Go.
This is the world we live in. If we weren't surrounded by it every day, if we didn't take it for granted, we'd be dumbstruck by its very intricacy and brilliance. This is an ordinary, familiar wooden pencil. You might think a pencil is simple. Chances are you've been using one since before you could even read or write. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's simple. In fact, it's complicated, elaborate, beautiful, elegant. Its very existence is too improbable for any one person to truly comprehend. These are the basic materials that go into a pencil: graphite, cedar, metal, and rubber. But if you had all the elements of a pencil right in front of you, could you make a pencil? It's not as easy as you might think. In fact, no single person on the face of the earth could do it without the help of countless others. And this is the key to understanding the world. A pencil, just like you and me, is the end result of a vast and intricate family tree, a symphony of human activity that spans the globe. Through their work and knowledge, a vast number of people have had a hand in making this simple pencil. Unlike your family tree, this one begins with an actual tree. The most immediate ancestor of the pencil is a cedar tree in the Pacific Northwest. But the loggers who harvest the timber are also its ancestors. And these men don't work alone. They, in turn, are assisted by the people and industries that produce the saws, rope, and countless other tools that they use. These are also the ancestors of our pencil. As is the waitress at a nearby diner who sells the loggers lunch, to say nothing of the thousands of people involved in producing that simple midday meal. Across time and space, the web grows. Consider the roads, trucks, ships, communication systems, and the people who design, build, and maintain them. All of them are necessary to bring the lumber to the mills and the slat factories that process them. All of them are also the ancestors of the pencil. And even with the work of all these people, so far all we have is a stained wooden slat, a naked half of a wooden body of a pencil. But its family tree is larger and more extensive. The graphite is mined in China and Sri Lanka. At the pencil factory, it's mixed with clay and heat and other materials before it's extruded, dried, and baked in a kiln. People from different continents, different cultures, cooperate to bring these materials together with waxes and kilns and equipment from across the world. These too are the ancestors of the pencil. And the same is true of the eraser. With ingredients from around the world, it's the end result of a similarly complex and exotic branch of the family tree. As is the ferrule, the metal band made from material that is mined, refined, and shipped from all over the world. Each part of the pencil is the result of the collaboration and cooperation of millions of people. Together, they form a process that is constantly changing and adapting. A change in the availability or cost of material from one place might make another source more desirable, and the process changes and adapts fluidly. And there is a fact that's still more astounding: the absence of a mastermind, of anyone dictating these countless actions which bring a pencil into being. Each member of this family tree supplies only a small amount of the necessary know-how needed to make a pencil. They do so voluntarily, not because they necessarily want pencils or like pencils, but because by working to create them, they exchange their labor and skills for the wages that let them buy what they want and need. What you're seeing is the market at work. The spontaneous configuration of creative human energies, of millions of people with their various skills and talents organizing voluntarily in response to human necessity and desire, as if led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of the intention. Every second we are alive, we benefit from the products of voluntary, spontaneous cooperation. This is the modern world. It's miraculous, it's intricate, and it gets better every day, so long as people are free to interact with each other. If we can leave the creative energies of humankind uninhibited, there's no limit to what we can accomplish.
Kamala Harris, you can thank me later for that. Isn't that fascinating, America? This pencil. The federal government doesn't know how to make this pencil. Politicians don't know how to make this pencil. Bureaucrats, 2 million of them, don't know how to make this pencil. What makes Kamala Harris think she knows how to make this pencil? You know what Kamala Harris wants to do to this pencil? She wants to break it. You know how you break it? Taxes, regulations, interference, harassment, legal investigations. Kamala Harris doesn't really believe in economics. She believes in ideology. She doesn't comprehend economics.
So, there it is, Economics 101, basic things that 6th graders learn, right? And then, of course, you have the famous pencil video. If you haven't seen that video, Maybe this was the first time you saw it, but it's an interesting video. It was done many, many years ago. And what it does is it shows you that competition is what is king. Competition and creating jobs. And everybody has their own part to play. Not the government, not coming in and telling industry what they can and cannot do. That doesn't help create wealth. That does just the opposite. So I thought it was a pretty interesting way to start. Now, I've been talking for the longest time and even correcting people. Even the great Alan Dershowitz, who's been on my show, I even corrected him live, right on the interview, when he called America a democracy. America is not a democracy. America is a constitutional republic. And I have been talking about that for the longest time. So, this is a video that kind of sheds light more on what we are been talking about and what I have been talking about. And it's a great educational tool for anyone to then use and to show to somebody else that makes that same mistake and talks about a democracy, okay? Because it breaks it down in a historical standpoint, but more importantly, it breaks it down and it shows you, here's why communism doesn't work. Here's why socialism doesn't work. Here's why a democracy doesn't work. And here's why a constitutional republic does and always will work. Go ahead and roll this clip.
When Benjamin Franklin exited the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a woman, "Sir, what have you given us?" His immediate response was, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Yet most Americans today have been persuaded that our nation's governmental system is a democracy and not a republic. The difference between these two is essential in understanding Americanism and the American system. Before we discuss political systems, however, it's helpful to address the confusion that has been spread about the political spectrum. Many have been led to believe that the political spectrum places groups such as communists on the far left, fascists or dictators on the far right, and political moderates or centrists in the middle. However, a more accurate political spectrum will show government having zero power on the far right to having 100% power on the far left. At the extreme right, there is no government. The extreme left features total government under such labels as communism, socialism, Nazism, fascism, princes, potentates, dictators, kings, any form of total government. Those who claim that Nazis and fascists are right-wing never define their terms. This amounts to spreading confusion. Toward the middle of the political spectrum can be found the type of government limited to its proper role of protecting the rights of the people. That's where the Constitution of the United States is. Those who advocate such a form of government are really constitutional moderates. So let's analyze the basic forms of government. They are monarchy or dictatorship ruled by one, oligarchy ruled by a few, democracy ruled by a majority, republic ruled by law, and anarchy, which is ruled by no one. In discussing these five, we'll see that they can be narrowed down to even fewer. Looking first at monarchy or dictatorship, this form of government doesn't really exist in the practical sense. It's always a group that puts one of its members up front. A king has his council of nobles or earls, and every dictator has his bureaucrats or commissars, the men behind the scenes. This isn't ruled by one, even though one person may be the visible leader. It's ruled by a group. So let's eliminate monarchy, dictatorship, because it never truly exists. Oligarchy, which is ruled by a group, is the most common form of government in all history. And it is the most common form of government today. Most of the nations of the world are ruled by a powerful few, and therefore oligarchy remains. At the other end, we find anarchy, which means without government. Some people have looked over history and found that many of its worst crimes were committed by governments, so they decided that having no government might be a good idea. But this is a mistake, because as the ancient Greeks stated, without law there can be no freedom. Our founding fathers agreed and held that some amount of government is a necessary force in any civilized, orderly society. In a state of anarchy, however, everyone has to guard life, liberty, and property, and the lives of family members. Everyone must be armed, and movement is severely restricted because one's property has to be protected at all times. Civilized people have always hired someone to do the guarding, a sheriff, a police force, or some branch of government. Once law enforcement was in place, the people were freer. They could leave their property, work in the fields, and so on. In short, the proper amount of government makes everyone freer. There are some who advocate anarchy, however, not because they want no government, but because they don't like what they have. They use anarchy as a tool for revolutionary change. The condition of anarchy is very much like a vacuum where something rushes in to fill it. These calculating anarchists work to break down the existing government with rioting, killing, looting, and terrorism. Tragically, the people living in such chaos often go to those best able to put an end to it and beg them to take over and restore order. And who is best able to put an end to the chaos? The very people who started it. The anarchists who created the problem then create a government run by them, an oligarchy, where they have total power. This is exactly what happened in Russia that led to Lenin taking total power, and in Germany, where Hitler's brown shirts created the chaos that brought him to power. But anarchy isn't a stable form of government. It's a quick transition from something that exists to something desired by the power-hungry. It's a temporary condition, and because it isn't permanent, we eliminate it as well. The word democracy comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratein, meaning to rule. Democracy, therefore, means the rule of the people, majority rule. This, of course, sounds good, but suppose the majority decides to take away one's home, or business, or children. Obviously, there has to be a limit. The flaw in democracy is that the majority isn't restrained. If more than half the people can be persuaded to want something in a democracy, they rule. What about republic? Well, that comes from the Latin, res meaning thing, and publica meaning public. It means the public thing, the law. A true republic is one where the government is limited by law, leaving the people alone. America's founders had a clean slate to write on. They could have set up an oligarchy. In fact, there were some who wanted George Washington to be their king. But the Founding Fathers knew history, and they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy. Why? Let's demonstrate the difference in the setting of the Old West. Consider a lynch mob in a democracy. 35 horseback riders chase one lone gunman. They catch him, and they vote 35-1 to hang him. Democracy has triumphed, and there's one less gunman to contend with. Now consider the same scenario in a republic. The 35 horseback riders catch the gunman and vote 35-1 to hang him. But the sheriff arrives, and he says, "You can't kill him. He's got his right to a fair trial." So they take the gunman back to town. A jury of his peers is selected, and they hear the evidence and the defense, and they decide if he shall hang. Does the jury even decide by majority rule? No, it has to be unanimous, or he goes free. The rights of the gunman aren't subject to majority rule, but to the law. This is the essence of a republic. Many Americans would be surprised to learn that the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution, nor does it appear in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. The founders did everything they could to keep us from having a democracy. James Madison, rightly known as the father of the Constitution, wrote in essay number 10 of the Federalist Papers, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." Alexander Hamilton agreed, and he stated, "We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy." Samuel Adams, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." The founders had good reason to look upon democracy with contempt, because they knew that the democracies in the early Greek city-states produced some of the wildest excesses of government imaginable. In every case, they ended up with mob rule, then anarchy, and finally tyranny under an oligarchy. During that period in Greece, there was a man named Solon who urged creation of a fixed body of law not subject to majority whims. But where the Greeks never adopted Solon's wise counsel, the Romans did. Based on what they knew of Solon's laws, they created the 12 tables of the Roman law and, in effect, built a republic that limited government power and left the people alone. Since government was limited, the people were free to produce, with the understanding that they could keep the fruits of their labor. In time, Rome became wealthy and the envy of the world. In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed. They forgot that the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. When government power grows, people freedom recedes. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman Constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet, and they went on the dole. Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets, demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security. Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars. Thus, democracy itself is not a stable form of government. Instead, it is the gradual transition from limited government to the unlimited rule of an oligarchy. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite.
So, next time someone says we live in a democracy, or we have to save our democracy, or we're doing what we can for democracy, show them this video. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one. Hey, Josh Bernstein here, America's favorite bald badass. Did you know that Bill O'Reilly charges $6.95 a month to see his content? Or how about the Blaze TV, who charges $10 a month? Or you could always subscribe to the Ben Shapiro podcast at $12 a month. But if you are looking for the best value and the most hardest hitting news, you've come to the right spot. Because here at JoshBernsteinUncensored.com, we drop the most jaw-dropping stories 7 days a week, starting at only $3 a month. So please head on over to the New Releases tab, become an exclusive member of the Badass Nation, and join the fight to save this country with one of America's most hated, feared, and censored conservative voices. Remember, if it's banned on social media, you'll find it here. God bless.